The stand-up comedian has views. He has views about global affairs. He has views about the national economy. He has views about the government and how it's going to be run. He has views which will be reflected in the personnel that he puts in positions of power and influence going forward. The stand-up comedian actually is a political phenomenon, and you're in, it seems to me, serious denial to the extent that you refuse to acknowledge and try to understand what that political phenomenon is. Make America Great Again is now the governing mantra of the party that controls not just the presidency, not just the Supreme Court, but both houses of Congress, of the party that won a landslide election in your country. Man, wake up. Hello, everybody. This is Glenn Loury. I am with John McWhorter. You are watching The Glenn Show or listening to The Glenn Show. Glenn Loury, Brown University and the Manhattan Institute, John McWhorter, Columbia University, and the New York Times. We talk every other week. This is our week. Hey, John.
Hi, Glenn. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm just wondering how you are doing. Have you recovered from the election in which much of your vituperation against Trump was refuted by the voters?
I had no idea that it was going to be that landslide, and I have processed it. It is very hard for me to have seen that and to feel good about my country. It's hard. It's really hard because all the things that I've said about him, I still believe and am seeing borne out. But if that many people see him as the better choice, then it's my job to try to put myself in their heads and understand why this happened.
Whoa. I mean, that's a very significant concession, John.
Well,
I mean, perhaps you could have done that years ago and you would have been
because
more in touch with what's going on in your country.
Part of wrapping my head around it, though, frankly, is remembering that most human beings don't follow, quote unquote, the news closely. And I completely understand that. I completely understand it. I'm not a political junkie myself, as I'm sure shows sometimes. So if you vote on the basis of your groceries, I can't look down on that if you've got other stuff to do and it was really just about inflation. If you have a major issue with the broken immigration system and that's your main point, that's not part of my life, despite the fact that I live among immigrants. But if that's your main issue, I get it. I get having a wedge issue. That doesn't account for all of the population, but to be honest, I think it counts for most of it. And I'm not pulling some H.L. Mencken and saying that everybody is a boob. That's not what I mean. It's just that if you're not that into who's going to be picked as attorney general and things like that, I get that Trump is a great stand-up comedian, for one, and that if he says he's going to fix inflation, if you only have so much attention to pay, you figure, well, that maybe he's a clown, but he'll do it. I get it. I can't hate America for that. For those who pay more attention, it is harder for me. It's about priorities, and I wrote a Times piece about this. How do you rank things? If you vote for Trump, it doesn't mean you're a racist. It just means that you rank racism lower than you rank other things. And I, of all people, understand that. I think America gets too hung up on quote-unquote systemic racism in particular. So that's where I am on it. But I had to work hard the next day not to think, what country am I in? But it's counterintuitive that the whole country would be crazy or racist or sexist or anything like that. So I had to think, okay, how can I make my peace with this? And I pretty much have.
I hear no criticism of the losing party, the Democrats, the candidate, the establishment that stood behind the candidate, the attitudes. I mean, the out-of-touch coastal elites who arrogantly thought they could lecture the rest of the country about what was right and wrong on some of the issues that you've mentioned, immigration, for example. Paul Krugman, I think of, just offhand, lecturing from your newspaper, the New York Times, the country, to the effect of, inflation really isn't nearly as bad as people think it is. The economy really is doing much better than the posters tell us that people think it is, and so on. Is there any sense of remorse or criticism of your class? Again, this is a position that I identify you with there, sitting there in New York City.
I'm going to make people mad again. No, frankly, I have tried to look as closely as I can at the extent to which hyper-wokeness and trans issues and a sense of Democrats as lecturing people they consider beneath them swayed the election. And from what I've seen, not meaningfully. I honestly think that the idea that Democrats looked down on the woman running the liquor store in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania that I'm always talking about, and that she voted for Trump because she felt like he likes her, that is something we talk about more than that woman running the liquor store is thinking about. And polling, exit polling seemed to show it. It was inflation, it was immigration, and it was that Trump seems real, which is, what you might be thinking when you're trying to run a liquor store and you have kids. I really don't think that the Democrats did anything wrong, except I think, obviously, Biden should have dropped out earlier, but how could he have? What human being, what king leader sees himself tottering a little bit and steps aside? I think that's a lot to ask of someone. And you can't feel how he's inside of himself and he's in a little bit of denial. I'm 59 and I can see that coming. So that wasn't going to happen. Now, anointing Kamala Harris, that was unideal. However, I think that she had her message out very clearly what she wanted to do for working and struggling people. She said it over and over again, but she didn't have the charisma that the stand-up comedian had. She stumbled a little at the beginning, but she wasn't opaque by the end.
Stand-up comedian.
He's great at
the
it.
stand-up comedian. So
Yeah.
So you're in a serious denial situation here, it seems to me. The stand-up comedian has views. He has views about global affairs. He has views about the national economy. He has views about the government and how it's going to be run. He has views which will be reflected in the personnel that he puts in positions of power and influence going forward. The stand-up comedian actually is a political phenomenon, and you're in, it seems to me, serious denial to the extent that you refuse to acknowledge and try to understand what that political phenomenon is. Make America Great Again is now the governing mantra of the party that controls not just the presidency, not just the Supreme Court, but both houses of Congress, of the party that won a landslide election in your country. Man, wake up.
MAGA is a hysterical, mean-spirited, anti-empirical, little 14-year-old boy wearing Axe fantasy. It has nothing to do with any kind of reality, the vision of America that man puts forward. And his views consist of, honestly, somebody who thinks he's playing a game of Risk rather than dealing with the real world. I mean, the old Milton Bradley, or maybe it was Parker Brothers game. And as for this deep state business, his views are all about that. This deep state that doesn't exist, which is really just people who don't like him that he wants to get back at. That's all he is. And I'm sorry, that is what I believe. I'm not being reductive. And I do see his main talent, because he isn't a good businessman. His main talent is that he is great at the podium, which I have written honestly, I think in an Atlantic piece back in 2016 or 17. That's the only thing in which he's competent. And it made a big difference. He's
driving the political conversation in your country, John. He's competent at that. He's competent at winning an election by a large margin. He's competent at that. He's competent at taking over a major Republican party and reshaping and redefining it. He's certainly capable of doing that.
He's capable in
He's
the way
back from the dead, man. I repeat. I mean, if it feels good, do it. I do stuff that feels good all the time, even though it perhaps isn't good for me or doesn't make any sense. If it feels good, if that's what you need to do to get through this, all right, my man, I'm with you. Go ahead in your delusion. But it's delusional. It's disconnected from reality.
No, this is not
Trump is probably the most important political figure in the last half century
That's
in
like
American politics.
Was the most important virus of the 2020s. Yeah, he's a virus. He's competent. It's funny, I just got finished interviewing Richard Dawkins in Dublin, and so I'm thinking about things
I want to hear about that.
He's competent like a virus. It's not something that he sits and plans carefully. It's all about, there are people who don't like me and I'm going to get them. And if you feel that way and you happen by chance to have a stand-up competence, you might change the Republican Party. He's a virus.
I could understand you saying that in 2015, 2016. I don't understand you saying that in 2024. I don't get it. He is this pathological thing. He's not what he actually is, which is a historic figure.
Hysterical.
Warts and all.
He is a wart.
I'm not going to play that game with you, John. Okay. We will agree to disagree about Donald J. Trump. You will continue to live in your fantasy land. And meanwhile, the actual political history of the country will be written while you stand aghast, agape,
that is actually
bewildered.
Quite true. Yeah. What you just said is true. It's going to be 4 years, and I've consoled myself by thinking two things. One, especially as you get a little older, 4 years is 10 minutes. It's not like he's going to be in forever, even though he seems to wish that maybe he could be. And there's also the black swan phenomenon. And this, it's very important. We don't know what's going to happen. Nobody knew that, COVID was going to happen. Nobody knew that George Bush, the education president, the second, was going to wind up, steering us into a silly war in Iraq. I, at the time, didn't know it was silly, I'll openly admit, but in retrospect. And so who knows what might happen in 2 years? Frankly, I think it might be the climate. Something is going to steer things in a direction that will be something other than, Matt Gaetz being the attorney general and, RFK Jr. actually being in the government, et cetera. Something's going to happen that will be more than just this, and I will welcome it. But yeah, aghast is correct. I am aghast. Not agape. That's what I tried to get rid of. But aghast, yeah, it's ghastly, and I am aghast.
I am savoring this moment. I'm glad we're having this conversation for posterity's sake. I will revisit it often in the future.
So, Glenn, how do you feel?
I feel a certain excitement, to be honest with you, a certain sense of anticipation. Yeah, I think something really important is happening.
Of what?
Of the reshaping of the political landscape, of the perhaps emergence of a working class center-right governing majority, working class oriented center-right governing majority in the country, of the defenestration of Nancy Pelosi-ism.
You mean the condescension?
Pardon?
Are you talking about this Democrat condescension or something else?
I'm not just Democrat, of coastal elite, smug, woke, as I said here when we talked about this briefly before, I think the whole conversation on race, diversity, and justice looks differently. I don't think a summer of 2020 sparked by the George Floyds and the Jacob Blakes and so forth of the world would go down nearly the same way going forward. I think the war in Ukraine is going to look a lot different going forward. I think Republican-tinged domestic policy on questions like taxes and so on, the immigration issue is going to look very different and so on. I'm actually thinking that my country is moving in the right direction with this move. I'm happy to see the Republicans in control of Congress. We'll see. We'll see what they make of it. They can mess it up, sure, but we'll see. In any case, what did you get out of the last 4 years with Joseph Biden and Kamala Harris? What are you proud of that they accomplished?
Biden did all sorts of unexciting but very important things
like
for
what?
the good of the nation in terms of, preparing to take care of our infrastructure, for example. There was a minor Great Society that was beginning to happen under Biden that they didn't market well enough, and or it would never seem as dramatic as pretending that we need to make the country great again by deporting tens of thousands of people.
You've heard me talk about Ground News. It's the website and app that I use every day to cut through the news and find the truth. They gather articles from over 50,000 news sources around the world and help you break free from big tech algorithms and echo chambers. Go to ground.news/Glenn Show to see how it works for yourself. My favorite Ground News feature is the blind spot feed. It shows you stories that are disproportionately reported by either the left or the right, and it's great for gaining a balanced perspective. Here is a headline you don't see much in left-leaning outlets. Majority of Americans support Trump's plan to declare emergency at the border. And here's one that doesn't appear in right-leaning sources. Walmart CFO says some prices might rise if Trump's tariffs take effect. For every story, Ground News gives you a breakdown of how many news sources covered it, their bias distribution across the left, center, and right, how reliable these sources have been in the past, and who owns them. You just can't get this type of news analysis anywhere else. My viewers can get 50% off the Unlimited Access Vantage plan. This is their best deal of the year, and it will only be available for a limited time. If you're already a subscriber, you can send Ground News as a gift to family or friends for 50% off also. So make sure you use my link at ground.news/Glenn Show. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code. Again, that's ground.news/Glenn Show.
Glenn, here's a question, and talk about the comments, which I don't read, but now and then I do. I take a peek now and then, not recently, but here's a question that I'm sure people are going to have for you, if I may.
You may.
And if I may, sometimes people ask me this, like out in the street. And I'm going to ask you.
Yeah.
And I'm asking you this with complete respect, not to mention awe, but still. What you just said about being excited that Republicans, these Republicans, it's not Nelson Rockefeller, these Republicans are going to be, it's not even George W. Bush, these Republicans are going to be running the country for the next 4 years, and you're excited. I have to be careful how I ask this, but I really think it's constructive. Are you saying that because you truly believe it? Or are you saying it because it's important to be a contrarian? And maybe even, if I may, Glenn, because you're telling me that I'm saying these things because it feels good, my things, maybe because it feels good to be a contrarian. It's a genuine question.
I don't take offense at the question. It's fair enough.
I'm glad.
And I am aware of my tendency to rush to the contrarian stance because, quote unquote, it feels good. But I've had it up to here with the Democrats. The Democratic Party is not my party, not by a long shot. You know what I thought about Obama? Kamala Harris as the candidate, she was an empty suit, in my opinion. She was a DEI vice president appointed by Biden who promised the country he was going to make a black, and then elevated to the position of his replacement candidate by the force of the argument that you can't do that to a black woman since she's the natural person standing in line, and et cetera. I don't know where she came from. I resented her being foisted on us. I resented being lectured. I identify with the people, the populist spirit, that this insurgency, and that's what it is in my opinion, it's a political insurgency. It's broadly gauged. It's a lot of people, not the tiki torch burning, pointy hat wearing racist or whatever, and not the idiots and incompetents that you seem to want to trumpet. This is a broadly based grassroots insurgency of people who are tired with a certain kind of complacent, entitled presumption that the Obamas personified. Did you hear those speeches that they gave during the campaign? Those people have been sent packing, and I'm glad they've been sent packing. And I am viewing with a cautious anticipation the dawning of a new era in American politics. That's a good thing. It's Reagan-esque. Morning in America, 1980 2.0. And let's see what happens. But the ground is now fertile for something different to emerge. And I'm excited at the prospect that we're going to get a different kind of leadership and a different set of leaders, a governing class. I like J.D. Vance. I like him. He's the heir apparent. He's who you're going to have to face off against in 2028.
He won't win.
Did you see the Democrats?
Yeah.
Who are you going to put up against Gretchen Whitmer?
There has to be
Gavin Newsom?
No, it would have to be somebody who comes out of nowhere like Obama did. And that's a challenge. There could be a Republican who had.
Of course, it depends on what happens in the next 4 years. If you get a repeat of the Biden fiasco, no, it won't be so good for him. If you get Morning in America 2.0, different story altogether.
I mean, yeah, you have a.
Are you hoping he fails?
What?
Let me ask you a question. Are you hoping that the president of the United States and his government fail so that you can say, I told you so?
Fail.
Drive inflation through the roof, bankrupt the government, start wars that you can't finish.
This would not make me feel good because it's not a TV show, it's our actual lives. But
precisely.
If it were a catastrophe, like let's say that the tariffs, if laid down rather transparently, make eggs cost a whole lot more than they cost now, etc.
By the way, I hope the tariffs do not get through Congress.
What do I know? Yeah, me too. No, it wouldn't be.
I think they're a very bad idea. I'm not signing on to everything that
Right. I know. I would expect, but if it were a complete disaster, it might teach. Now you're going to think I'm being this condescending person standing in front of the Capitol making some modern Democrat Obama speech, but it might teach the populace to be a little more careful in who you vote for and to listen a little more closely to what they say they're going to do and how it might affect you. Yeah, I would think that, but I'm not wishing that because it would hurt them more than it would hurt me. If inflation happens, I'm in a position where unless we're talking about Weimar Germany, I'm fine. But these are people who would really be suffering. I don't want that to happen. Glenn, you're right that Kamala Harris, got dragged into something. Yes, it was DEI that made her the vice president at all. I never liked watching her standing there with her husband smiling with the Bidens back in the beginning. I was thinking, why her? What's going on? And she had some good moments out there, but she has limited charisma of the kind that makes things happen in our modern era where so much is about social media. And if you think about it, a Harris presidency, how much was really going to happen? How much was she going to make happen on the basis of connections and people power and carrying a sense of significance about her, even less than Obama? It would have been kind of a caretaker presidency. She may not have won again. I think that's safe to say, like the Reagan presidency. And I was, no fan, but, just off of the book whose author, I gave the wrong author when I talked about it. It wasn't George Will, it was Max Boot. I don't know why I mixed up those two people. But there was a Reagan presidency. And for 8 years, you have to, there was a mood he created. There was a sense of forward motion. He had something. Kamala Harris would never have had that. So yes, this is all going to be more interesting, but I'm sorry. I do believe that President Trump is a complete idiot. Reagan was not. He was no professor, but he did the work. This guy doesn't.
This idiot pulled off an virtually unprecedented comeback from the political graveyard. This idiot actually won a landslide election that practically nobody saw coming. This idiot took control of a major public political party and has reshaped it in its own image. This idiot is probably setting the stage for the next decade or more of American public life. He's so successful. He's, If he's so stupid, how could he be so successful?
It was an accident because he has unique charisma in the era of social media. It
That's
wouldn't have
delusional. With respect,
talk about black swans. If by chance his idiocy and charisma boils down to some good things getting done, including good things getting done for the suffering working class, and if the result of all this mainly is that we have this rainbow working class, quote unquote, coalition, yeah, I get that.
Now you're talking. That's one of the things that I'm excited may come to pass.
Mm-hmm. And I also liked seeing so many Black and Latino people voting for him, despite the fact that it's rather clear that he wouldn't like them very much. I found that intelligent. That's good. That's the way things should go. You do not withdraw your vote from somebody because, oh, he's a racist. I agree with you about that sort of thing. That's not how human affairs works. That's not how voting in a diverse society works. I like that so many Black people in particular are past that kind of Puritanism. That I liked. So there's something that I'm not agape about.
Well,
so
something we can agree about.
Yeah.
All right. Tell us about Ireland. You know, John and I often talk about higher education on this podcast, obviously. That's the universe we both inhabit. And why not? It's a topic that has moved front and center of late at both the state and national level. Free speech on campus, viewpoint diversity on campus, cancel culture on campus, soaring tuition, affirmative action, race-based admissions, accreditation, the erosion of standards, attacks on the classics, hiring litmus tests, critical race theory, diversity, equity, and inclusion. You name it, it's in the news. So, with all that's going on, and there's a lot going on, to whom can one turn as a trusted resource of all issues related to campus reform, whether you're a student, faculty, trustee, administrator, donor, policymaker, or alumni? One source we want you to know about and strongly recommend as a credible and respected voice on all these issues is the American Council of Trustees and Alumni, or ACTA, whom we're pleased to have supporting this episode. ACTA is on the front lines, promoting academic excellence, academic freedom, and accountability at America's colleges and universities. They don't just serve as trusted advisors to college trustees and alumni, they help arm reformers with resources, ideas, recommendations, information, even grassroots alumni support through their Campus Freedom Initiative. They make positive changes happen, and they approach these issues in a nonpartisan, balanced, informed, highly credible way, which we appreciate. If you care deeply about these issues, as John and I do, you really must know more about the American Council of Trustees and Alumni. Start by looking them up on the web at goacta.org. That's goacta.org. And follow them on Twitter and Facebook. You're just back from Ireland.
Yeah. Oh, Ireland was fun. My job was to interview, and I had to do it twice, Richard Dawkins. He's on his farewell tour. He has this wonderful new book called The Genetic Book of the Dead, A Darwinian Reverie, which sums up his work in very accessible fashion with very beautiful illustrations. I forget, Ava Landowska, I forget her name.
Now, Dawkins is a household name, but why don't you tell us who he is anyway?
Richard Dawkins is an evolutionary biologist, and I guess you could say paleontologist, who is probably one of the world's leading public intellectuals, and particularly of that subject. And he has written several books.
The Selfish Gene, isn't that?
The Selfish Gene was the first one, and I think the most important one, although he thinks his most important book was The Extended Phenotype. He also did The God Delusion, where he has become, he doesn't like to be called this, but one of the new atheists, along with Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, and Daniel Dennett. And he is frankly just brilliant. I grew up reading him and Stephen Jay Gould, who had some major disagreements, but Dawkins is an incredible thinker. My favorite book of his is called The Ancestor's Tale. I would reach up and grab it, but I don't have that book over my desk. But he basically just goes through every type of animal in the world and goes to the very beginning and shows you how one original creature became all the ones that we have now. It's very long, and I could not get enough of it. But
how old is he, John? Excuse
he's
me.
84 now, and he gets into trouble on places like Twitter or X, where not only is there the atheism, but he argues against these new concepts of gender being fluid, etc. And he's quite uncompromising, partly in that British way where he says things very directly with a certain wit, which can come off as especially condescending to Americans who don't get that Brit thing. But he's not actually trying to be obnoxious. There's styles of argumentation that don't go over as well here as over there. But he's a phenom, really. And I was honored to be asked to interview him. And
You say a farewell tour?
Yeah, because one reaches a certain age. I didn't ask him, but I think he's not going to be doing any more touring. And so he has done 22 interviews with various people around the world. And mine were my two were his final two in Dublin. He had just been interviewing with somebody else in Belfast. And he was in Austin here in the United States. And so I think, feels like he's wrapping up touring, although he's writing another book, he told me. So it's not that he's saying farewell to the world. But yeah, I got to ask him about stuff. And I think maybe the idea was that I would be a good match with him because of anti-wokeness. I'm not sure whether the people who asked me know that I'm a dinosaur fanatic and have read Dawkins, my whole life and was honored. And I didn't say anything, but I made the interviews mostly about evolutionary biology and paleontology and gene theory and the things that I've learned from him and questions I've wanted to ask. And then the woke stuff I left to the end on both nights because frankly, to me, it gets a little boring after a while, and he feels the same way. What we really wanted to talk about was the science. And I'm not a scientist, but I can play one on TV, and linguistics calls itself a science. So we had a good time. I'm not wearing this sweater as like a symbol that I was just over in Merry Old Ireland. That's
agreeing.
But I did bring it there. And so, yeah, it was a good time. These will be online. They'll be on YouTube sooner rather than later. We did 2 nights, so I had to come up with two
nights of
questions.
Interviewing a world-class evolutionary biologist about his work. I mean, I would have been intimidated beyond even, belief by the task of having to do that. How did you prepare?
To tell you the truth, Glenn, I have no stage fright, like none. I don't know why, but some people ask me sometimes in the wings while I'm doing something, "Aren't you nervous?" No. This was the one time I can remember being a little before the first one, thinking, "Am I going to do this right?" Because it's him. And you're going to think I'm just saying this, but I remember one of the very rare times that I also felt that was before we did our first blogging ads, and I thought, Glenn Loury, and I'm going to go up against him. I really did feel that then. And with this, it was that. But after 1 minute, I just thought, damn it, I do belong here because I'm interested. The way I prepared was really reading the book, and then I kind of forgot to take any kind of notes, partly because I never take notes, but I'll fold the pages down. And I realized about 4 days before, I don't know what I'm going to ask him. So I just went back through the book and found some things where I figured what he wrote would lead to some interesting questions. And on the woke, anti-woke stuff, I mean, people like you and me can now pull that out of the air. So I just thought, okay, something about trans, something about, and I guess we do this, I'm some kind of used to the format, and, you do podcasts when you have a book out, and I just thought, okay, I can settle into that role. But also I've been reading him all my life. I read everything that he comes up with, and often more than once. And I was just, talk about viruses and chance. It was just chance that I wound up with the opportunity to do this, but it was great. I really enjoyed it.
A live audience. What was the setting?
One of those auditoriums that are the same all over the world. That big auditorium with the balcony. I remember thinking I could be in Austin, I could be in Boston. All of these buildings look exactly the same. But except one thing that was interesting was, and I enjoyed this, I truly enjoyed it, is that this is Dublin. And so I have some fans there, but not that many. It was all about him. And I kind of liked that. He filled that room. It was like 1,200 people. He filled it both times. But I walked out to introduce him. And for some reason, the way they did it, I was not introduced. So I just kind of walked out. And it was interesting. It wasn't a me event. It was about him.
Yeah.
And I could tell some of them knew me. Like I said, I'm John McWhorter. And they was like, yay. That's it. It wasn't me. And I really liked kind of being able to be the fly on the wall instead of it being all about me and all the questions coming at me. I liked interviewing Richard Dawkins. It was fun. But it was also nice that I could tell that they knew me a little. Like it wasn't that I was utterly unknown. I'm thinking I'm over here in Ireland and I'm a bit of a name, but not like him. He had a line practically around the block for book signing. And I was just watching and thinking, imagine having that kind of pull. That's like a rock star for people like us. So yeah, it was really something. It was cloudy and kind of cold. And the hotel I was in wasn't in the real Dublin. It was near the airport. So I only got to walk around downtown a little bit. But, it was nice. And you don't want to say it there, but the accent or accents there, it's nice listening to people, talking with that accent and you being the one who has the accent. I like that I'm the American. That's another thing, cliche coming. But in Dublin, I am thought of more as American than Black, which is always just interesting. The Black thing doesn't matter to them as much, although there was much more immigration there than I thought.
I was going to say, isn't there must be a lot of non-whites in Ireland
Asians
these
with
days.
The Irish accent. It was very interesting. There are a lot of them. But yeah.
Can you give us a flavor of question and response that exemplifies this interview? What was your favorite exchange with him? Something with meat on the bones.
Okay. One question that I asked him was, if it's all about genes, it's not about organisms fighting to survive, but under his theory, it's all about just the gene wants to survive. That's what it's all about. If that's what it's all about, and if he's right, which I assume that he is, although there are people who don't think so, how does he find wonder in the world? Isn't it kind of depressing if that's all that's going on? If that means that all of the love, all of the Beethoven, all of the soul, I don't know, I'm thinking about them, but all of that is just a kind of an accident in the same way as we perceive color, but the colors aren't really there. That's not what the world, quote unquote, really is. We just perceive color. I said, how do you be happy? Doesn't your theory depress you? And he said that no, it doesn't, that even if it's all an illusion, that's all we've got, and he enjoys the illusion. But I could tell that, he said he had been asked it before, but I could tell that he liked that question. Then the audience got to ask questions, and they on these little cards. And many of them were along the lines of, are we genetically programmed for violence, for example?
Somebody else screened the cards?
Yes, luckily. Although a couple of interesting ones got through anyway. But yeah, somebody was screening the cards, and then I would read the card. And you have to time it. Like on one of the nights, I ran out of cards. So then I had to come up with some other questions of my own very quickly and things like that. But that can be kind of fun. It's like you're driving a car. And so, yeah, and the audience was rapt. You could tell that every word he said, they were hanging on him. It was not my audience, as in I was not the star of this. The little things that I do, the kind of jokes that I make only worked so well. They were into him. It was not me. And I was enjoying driving the car. So, yeah. And so
he's an Irishman.
No, he's English.
Aha.
He's got the perfect Danish accent. And so I'm sure that they did London and probably somewhere north of that, etc. And then they got to Ireland. There were 22 stops on the tour. And I must
You didn't talk about the atheism stuff at all?
Did we do atheism? Yeah. I didn't, because we see so much of that debate in America, and I was more interested in the spiders and the genes and stuff like that. But the questions asked about it. One person's question was, is he close to any people who are atheists? And if so, how does he manage?
You mean
And
people
he
who
kind
are
of,
not atheists?
yeah, who are not atheists.
Yeah.
And what he essentially said was that he is not close to anyone who is not atheist. And he said that there's some scientists. He's really baffled. Talk about me being baffled by Trump voters. He is baffled that someone in particular can be a scientist and also be a devout, non-atheist. And he says that he's on both nights. He said that in some cases, when a scientist says that they believe in God, they mean it in a very hazy, general way that has nothing to do with the earth being 6,000 years old and Moses and Mary and all of that. But he said he knows some scientists who really do believe both in, frankly, truth, the universe is billions and billions of years old, but then also believe on another level that the earth is only 6,000 years old, et cetera, and they kind of compartmentalize, and he's baffled by that. And I said, I'm not, because people need a sense of belonging. People need a sense of we-ness, and that can trump logic itself. And you and I have talked about that. And I said, I can completely see how somebody could know the truth, but then also compartmentalize their brain in such a way that they kind of pretend to believe something else. I've seen it in very religious people, because they like having a tribe. It's not that it gives their life a sense of meaning. They like that there are other people who pretend or do believe these things. And that matters to people. Most people aren't loners or people who want to march to the beat of their own drum. And it's easy to say that you do, but that's not the natural human condition. Most people want to have a tribe. So I get it, but he 2 times said that he didn't.
Does he believe in race as a useful category of social analysis?
We didn't talk about that, but I am quite sure. I'm trying to think of somewhere where he's addressed it, and maybe my memory has faded, but I'm quite sure he knows that race is a biological construct. There are genetic features that you can see that make it clear that somebody is the color of you or me, as opposed to somebody who is Asian and has a certain configuration of the eyes. All of that is real. There are, of course, intermediate cases. They're not, strict lines, but race is real, and I'm sure that he knows that. In terms of race as a social categorization, I'm sure he wishes that we could get past it. Like, from everything I've read of him, I'm sure that's what he would say. But he would definitely say that the idea that race is a biological fiction is fiction, which it is. I mean, there's no denying it. So that's me speaking for Richard Dawkins.
I'll make this the last of these kinds of questions, but what about Charles Murray, IQ, genetics? You say he believes in genes. Genes are the thing. But what about the idea that genetic differences between population subgroups might be an important factor in explaining disparities in performance and things like that?
I have not seen him jump in.
You say he and Gould, excuse me for interrupting, he and Stephen Jay Gould, the late great paleontologist, were at loggerheads about something. What was that?
Oh, well, that was the whole issue of, there are 2 things. Gould believing that there's some things that evolve not for any particular purpose, and that maybe are just taken on to serve some other purpose later. But they're things that just happen, like a whale might have a black side and a white side of its under jaw, and that has no purpose whatsoever. Dawkins believes that every single feature has a purpose, and that's how evolution works. So they were at loggerheads about that.
About evolution.
And then also Gould, along with Richard Lewontin, thought that evolution jumps, that there are these big leaps, and that a creature can become almost another creature much more quickly than Dawkins supposes. Dawkins is more incremental. And to the extent that anybody cares what I think, from reading both of them, I always found Dawkins more convincing, although I also read everything Stephen Jay Gould wrote, and he taught me how to write.
Punctuated equilibrium, wasn't that?
Punctuated equilibrium. Exactly.
Yeah.
Where were we? Race and IQ.
Charles Murray and that. Yeah.
This is going to be the only thing people clip from this show. But I'm not going to speak carefully. I'm just going to say, putting myself in the head of Richard Dawkins, I am quite sure I am reasonably sure, I haven't seen him pronounce on this, that he believes that there's no reason that there would not be race-based IQ differences, given the fact that there are such obvious differences in the way genes express themselves on the basis of racial classification elsewhere. So if you and I have relatively thicker lips than most white people, although, of course, there are thick-lipped white people and thin-lipped black people, but still, there's clearly a specification. Why would that not be true of brain configurations? I'm sure that he would say that. I would guess he would rather not say it. But that's my guess. And maybe he has pronounced upon it, but I don't remember seeing it.
Very interesting.
Mm-hmm. I love this stuff. Not the race and IQ, but,
No, I think it's a tribute to you, John, that you were invited to play that kind of role in such an event. It very much to your credit.
Mm-hmm.
So, mazel tov.
Thank you. It's one of the few things where I'm actually going to save the photo that we took afterward. I don't save those much, but the kind of that thing where everybody's doing that. I just thought this is not going to happen again. So yeah, it was. I was pleased.
Yeah. All right, John. I think we've covered the waterfront here. We have checked in the post-election mode. We continue to man our respective barricades on the Donald Trump question. There will be plenty of opportunity going forward to revisit the merits of the Trump phenomenon.
There's going to be something every week. I mean, that's one good thing about this. It's not going to be hard to think of things to talk about.
All right, we have our November Q&A that we need to execute before the end of the month. I'll be back to you on that.
Okay.
I think that's a wrap for this week, this bi-weekly Glenn and John conversation. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for tuning in, folks.